Have you ever longed for a daily dose of affection? Have you ever found yourself wishing for a small gesture of care, even when you're surrounded by people? A hug for no reason, a good morning message, someone genuinely asking how you're doing. Sometimes, loneliness doesn't come from the absence of people, but from the absence of affection. And this can happen to anyone, even those living surrounded by family. As the years go by, it's natural for relationships to change. Children grow up, friends move away, life slows down. And along with that, something quiet begins to happen. Spontaneous moments of affection become rarer. We don't talk about it much, but we feel it. Deep down, we miss being remembered, touched, truly heard. But what if I told you that affection can come from unexpected places? That connection isn't limited to the old ways of being together. Today, we're going to explore a new way of building emotional bonds. Broader, more creative, and most importantly, still possible, even after 60. In this video, you'll hear stories, discover ideas, and explore paths that show how emotional connection can be rekindled. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that affection might be closer than it seems. Maybe just a click away, a conversation, or a simple, "I'm here." The new loneliness. When there's silence even with people around. You don't have to be alone to feel lonely. Many people live with this quiet contradiction, especially later in life. Sometimes there are children, neighbors, familiar faces at church or in the building. Yet the days still feel too long. Affection seems scarce, and the routine feels emotionally empty. This new kind of loneliness isn't just about physical isolation. It can show up even in the presence of others. When there's no genuine connection, when touch becomes rare, and conversations lose their depth, the heart notices. And that isn't exaggeration, weakness, or drama. It's human. Over time, many relationships change. Children are busy, grandchildren live at a different pace, and lifelong friends may no longer be around. It's natural for social spaces to shrink, but the need for affection remains alive, quietly beating beneath the surface. Loneliness in old age is often treated as a fact of life, something inevitable. But it doesn't have to be that way. The issue isn't the lack of people, but the absence of true presence. And recognizing that is already the first step toward change. Instead of simply accepting the emptiness, we can choose a different path to rebuild affection. Not the way it once was, but in the way it can be now. This new stage of life can also be an opportunity to redefine what companionship means. And sometimes all it takes is a small opening, a casual conversation, a new group, an unexpected phone call, to reignite that spark of belonging. The most beautiful thing is that affection doesn't retire. It simply finds new ways to express itself. This journey begins by acknowledging the pain of what's missing, but it doesn't end there. Because it's often from that very emptiness that people rediscover the value of connection and realize that love can reappear, even where it once seemed impossible. How care, kindness, and the feeling of belonging can arise outside of traditional paths, through surprising and transformative connections. Sometimes, new affection is just around the corner, disguised as friendship, attention, or an unexpected presence. Expanded love. Bonds that grow beyond the traditional family. When we think about affection in later life, the first image that often comes to mind is that of family. Caring children, smiling grandchildren, a full house on the weekends. But what happens when that image doesn't come true? Or when it does exist, but still doesn't meet the everyday need for care, attention, and true presence. That's when a transformative idea emerges. Love can be expanded. It can come from other places with different colors, different names. And often, it's in this unexpected affection that we rediscover meaning. Throughout life, we're taught that family is defined by blood ties. But as we grow older, we learn that affection doesn't always follow that logic. It's built in the everyday moments, in listening, in steady companionship, in small acts of care. Sometimes it's a neighbor who stops by just to check in. Other times, it's someone from your walking group who becomes a confidant. There are even cases where a caregiver, a younger friend, or a volunteer at a local community center steps into that deeply emotional space. At first glance, these connections might seem smaller. But more often than not, they're what sustain our emotional well-being. They are chosen bonds, nurtured with freedom and mutual affection. And it doesn't matter whether they began at 30 or 70. What matters is that they nourish, support, and warm the heart. It's common for our traditional support network to change over time. Some people leave, others drift away, and life reorganizes our relationships. But that doesn't mean our hearts must go on hold. On the contrary, this is a chance to rebuild our network based on the present, not just the past. What we call expanded love is precisely this openness to relationships that don't fit traditional molds, but still fulfill the essential role of caring. People who come into our lives later, but with real presence. Relationships based on choice, not obligation. There's something deeply liberating about that. Realizing that we can still be part of someone's life, and allow others to be part of ours. Without old roles, without outdated expectations. Just presence, listening, and meaningful exchange. These bonds don't replace family, but they complement it, embrace us, and often fill the emotional gaps that traditional structures can't reach. If we're open to it, these new forms of affection can surprise us. Sometimes, they begin in a casual conversation. Other times through a community project, a dance class, or a walk in the park. What matters most is remembering. Affection doesn't have just one shape. It can be recreated. And it can be reborn in the unexpected. Take a look at how technology, once seen as cold or distant, can actually be a powerful ally in building these new kinds of connection. Technology as affection, when the digital brings hearts closer. For a long time, we associated technology with youth, speed, and superficiality. To many, it seemed like a barrier, cold, complicated, impersonal. But little by little, that view has been changing. What once felt like an obstacle is now revealing itself as a bridge, especially when it comes to emotional connection. It's no exaggeration to say that, for many older adults, technology has become an invisible thread of affection. Through a video call, they get to see a distant grandchild smile. In a messaging group, they share recipes, memories, or a warm good morning. And during times of greater isolation, this digital contact gains even more meaning. More and more, people are discovering that you don't need to be a tech expert to benefit from it. The simple act of learning how to send a message, make a video call, or play music on an app can transform someone's day. Not because of the function itself, but because of the connection it creates. Take Mrs. Lucy, 68 years old. A widow for some time, her days were quiet and predictable. Until, encouraged by a friend, she joined an online book club. There, she rediscovered the joy of stories and formed unexpected friendships. including one with a 27-year-old woman from across the country. What began as book discussions soon became daily check-ins, messages of support, and a meaningful bond. Screen-mediated, yes, but deeply real. There's also Mr. Richard, 73, who learned how to use a walking app. Not only did he begin tracking his routes and achievements, but he also started chatting with other older adults in the area, even organizing in-person group walks. The phone, which once felt like a complicated device, became a tool for connection. These stories are not exceptions. More and more, we see older adults discovering in digital tools a new sense of belonging. And this doesn't require deep technical knowledge. What matters most is the willingness to try, to make a few mistakes, to laugh at oneself, and to keep going. Today, there are apps designed especially for people over 60, with larger buttons, readable text, and intuitive commands. There are platforms that make it easier to exchange messages, send photos, join interest-based groups, attend video meetups, and even participate in social networks tailored for older audiences. Some virtual assistants even remind you to drink water, say good morning, and tell jokes, offering not just utility, but a kind of symbolic companionship. The truth is, when used with intention and lightness, technology stops being just a tool and becomes an extension of care. It brings people closer, it listens, it supports. More than that, it expands one's world, making it possible to find people who share interests, emotions, and stories, even from far away. Of course, there are challenges. Sometimes it's hard to understand how things work, and sometimes there's frustration. But every small step on this path opens new doors. And the most beautiful part is realizing that, no matter your age, you can still be moved by a new conversation, a shared video, or an unexpected exchange. Because in the end, it's not the technology itself that matters, it's what it carries, a real possibility for affection. And that affection, however subtle, slowly becomes part of everyday life. In the next chapter, we'll explore these small gestures that often go unnoticed but have the power to transform a day or an entire life. Quiet affection, small gestures that embrace. Affection doesn't always show up in grand declarations or big gestures. More often, it lives in the quiet spaces of everyday life. In a good morning sent with care, a quick call just to check in, a sincere compliment, or even the simple act of remembering the date of a doctor's appointment or an important meeting. This is quiet affection, subtle, yet deeply transformative. As the years go by, we begin to realize that presence doesn't have to be constant to be meaningful. Sometimes, just knowing someone thought of you is enough to warm your heart. An unexpected voice message, a shared photo, an emoji sent with love. These are small sparks that, together, create an atmosphere of comfort. What's most beautiful is that these gestures don't require great skill or planning. All it takes is intention. A simple, "Hey, I thought of you today," can have a much bigger impact than we imagine, especially for someone who lives alone or has quieter days. These gestures are also reciprocal. When we begin practicing them, we open space for them to return to us. We become part of a kind of exchange that asks for no obligation, but nourishes the soul. These are everyday rituals of affection. Morning messages exchanged between friends, memories shared through old photos, comments on videos that spark laughter. All of it builds presence, even from afar. It's important to remember that affection doesn't depend solely on physical closeness. Of course, touch, hugs, and eye contact have their place and are deeply missed. But when that's not always possible, other paths open up. Digital language, when used with warmth, can create real bonds. And those bonds are no less true just because they happen through a screen. In fact, many people say they've started feeling closer to others after adopting small virtual habits of care. A 74-year-old woman shared that when she started sending a daily good morning to 3 friends on WhatsApp, she ended up strengthening ties that had once grown distant. Now they talk every day. Sometimes it's just a hi. But for the person on the other end, it means everything. Deep down, what we all long for is to be remembered. Not in grand or dramatic ways, but sincerely. To be seen, heard, and felt. And for that, we don't have to wait for special dates or rare occasions. Quiet affection is built in the details, and it's what sustains that day-to-day feeling of belonging. It's about learning the importance of allowing yourself again. Because for these gestures to happen, we must first make space, in our schedules, in our hearts, and in the way we connect with the world. The value of allowing yourself again. Making room for the unexpected. There comes a moment in life when many people feel they've already lived all they were meant to live. That the most important bonds have already been formed. The deepest friendships have already happened. And emotional surprises are things of the past. But this is an idea we must learn to question with time. Allowing yourself again is an act of courage and hope. It means looking at the present and seeing in it possibilities that haven't yet been lived. It's understanding that age doesn't close the doors to affection. It can actually open others that once felt invisible. Many older adults share a similar feeling, that they don't want to be a bother, that it's too late to build new connections, that there's no more room for the new. But what we see in practice is quite the opposite. When there's even a small bit of openness, the unexpected happens. A community group becomes a space for friendship. A casual invitation builds trust. An online exchange becomes a daily source of warmth. Of course, allowing yourself comes with risks. The risk of not being met with the same enthusiasm, of stepping out of your comfort zone, of exposing your emotions. But it also brings rewards. The rediscovery of sensitivity, the feeling of being alive, the joy of forming genuine connections. A simple example, Mrs. Ann, 70 years old, resisted joining a community craft group for months. She felt out of place, like it wasn't for her anymore. But after accepting an invitation from a neighbor, she found not just an activity, but a support network. Today, she has new friends, frequent exchanges, and above all, a renewed sense of energy. That's what allowing yourself is about. Opening a small window in your routine, in your fear or shyness, and letting something new come in. Not as a duty, but as a choice. Affection doesn't need to be rushed, but it does need space to happen. And that space only opens when we look at life with the humility of someone who still has more to feel. And the courage of someone who believes it's never too late to begin again. Affection is a renewable right. We've come this far exploring many forms of care, warmth, and presence. We talked about the loneliness that can appear even when we're not alone. We explored the bonds that grow beyond family, the possibilities that technology offers, and the power of small, quiet gestures. And above all, we saw that affection has no age. It simply changes shape. If there's one thing this stage of life teaches us, it's that love doesn't run out. It may lie dormant, but it never disappears. And contrary to what some may say, you don't have to wait for it to come from others. Sometimes it all begins with an inner decision to open yourself up to feel again. Affection is a renewable right. You can seek it, nurture it, offer it as many times as you wish. There's no rule and no expiration date. So, how about taking the first step now? A message, a phone call, a bit of curiosity about a new group or app. Nothing too big, just enough to gently say, I'm still here, and I want to connect. Because in the end, what keeps us alive inside isn't the time that passes. It's the bonds we create as it passes.